It's time for the Hockey Writers Grindline, a weekly show covering everything Detroit Red Wings. Brought to you by our own iconic top line of Wings writers. Sit back and enjoy the grind.
Welcome to the Hockey Writers Grindline. I'm your host, Patrick Brown. Joining me as always are a clean-shaven Devin Little and Kyle Knopp. Sorry about your Golden Knights, Devin. And we are lucky yet again to be joined by one of the biggest names in hockey. Please help me welcome Lester Patrick Trophy-winning journalist for Detroit Hockey Now and Hockey Buzz, author and longtime NHL beat reporter, currently reporting, Kevin Allen. Kevin, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here. Happy to talk a little hockey. And, and usually by this time we have things decided or at least close to it, but we still got another round to go.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, well, let's dive right in. There's quite a bit to talk about today. And I want to start with the goalie situation currently in Detroit. We will be releasing one of our Grindline columns coming up this week. So make sure you tune into that. In the meantime, I want to talk about the goalie situation and what the Red Wings might be looking at doing long-term. And who better to start with here than Kevin Allen. Kevin, your thoughts on where the Wings goalie situation currently stands and what they might do to shore that up in the future, whether that's short-term or long-term.
Yeah, well, I think Yzerman will start by looking at the free agent market. I think they'd love to have Bernier back. The tandem worked out pretty well. Bernier's been good for 2 seasons for him, and I think they really like him. Obviously, he's not the long-term solution, nor is Greiss. So they have to get a younger goalie, and I think the fan base wants them to take Jesper WALLSTET,
yeah.
The Swedish goalie, who some people believe is better than Spencer Knight, and they think that he could be ready within 2 seasons. But, as much as Yzerman is cast as a guy willing to pull the trigger on a goalie because, he took a pretty darn good one when he was in Tampa Bay and led the team to the Stanley Cup. But he took him at 19. And I think he's going to be reluctant to take a goalie at 6. So, he's hard to read. And you don't get any information coming out of Detroit. But if I'm guessing he's going to bypass him. And I think he's going to hope that he can get Kosa down at where he has the Capitals pick. But, he may be situated in both places a little bit too early to take WALLSTET and a little bit too late to get Kosa. So that'll put in the second round. I'm almost sure they will take a goalie in the second round. I think probably they would be interested in Rob Gaudreau, played for Team Canada at the World 18, or Trevor Lennox, who's a big 6'4" guy. And also, I wouldn't be shocked if they take someone late as well. I expect them to take 2 goalies, maybe someone like Carl Lindbaum, who was Sweden's goalie at the U18. Most people thought he was rather average looking, but he played pretty well in the medal game. So. And as we all know, Detroit's a little partial to Swedish players.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, Håkan Andersson has been over there a long time. And, when you take a foreign goalie, there's no pressure to get him into the mix. You can just sort of let him watch him play over there, get in the Swedish men's league and kind of let it happen. That's another reason why I think they might also consider someone like Cameron Rowe, who's at Wisconsin.
Sure.
Another situation where you can just put him in college. He's in college already. He had a good freshman year, and you can watch him develop and hope he doesn't stay so long that he becomes an unrestricted free agent and leaves you. But I think Yzerman knows he's got to get a young goalie to fit with this mix. I'm surprised actually that he hasn't tried to get one in the later rounds and just see what happens.
Sure.
But they're much harder to predict. And another reason why I don't think he'll take him at 6 is, you're probably not going to be able to use him until he's 24, 25. And I think with that 6th pick, you got to do better than that.
So just a few minutes into our show, and Kevin has already blown up my opinion for our upcoming article. So fantastic. Appreciate that. And let's toss it.
This, though, you're, as I said, you're only guessing with Steve Yzerman.
Of course.
Really
of course.
So, I could be totally wrong.
Just having fun for sure. Want to toss it over, Kyle, your opinion on, and don't give away too much for what's coming up this weekend, but your opinion on the goalie situation, what we're looking at.
Yes, I think we need to pick up another goalie, maybe a number one for the next couple of years. Like Kevin said, Grice played fairly well down the stretch. He kind of struggled at the beginning of last season, but Bernier's been playing great. And so I wouldn't mind bringing Bernier back, staying with that rotation for another year or two as well. But for the goaltenders that are out in free agent, I think the two that we should really take a look at in my mind are Freddie Anderson and Linus Ullmark from Buffalo. I think they're two big goalies that are still still at that prime age. They're right around 30, both of them, and they're come at a decent cap hit. So I would look at one of those in free agency, but I wouldn't mind bringing Bernier back for another season.
Sure. Sounds good. And Devin, let's swing it over to you. Bring it home. What do the Wings do to address their goaltending situation?
I think having a guy like Jonathan Bernier in the organization, as it stands right now, is kind of the ultimate fallback option. If all else fails, you've got a guy that, like has already been said, has been solid for the last 2 years and has voiced his desire to stay with the organization. And I think that's invaluable. Now, that being said, I would not be surprised to see or to hear or whatever that Yzerman is looking around and seeing what else he could maybe bring in. Kyle just talked about free agent options. Obviously, there's both WALLSTEDT and Kosa at the projected to go in the first round of the draft. I know I've got my eye on one of them, but there's also goalies that can be acquired on the trade market too, especially around the expansion draft. One situation that I've kind of got my eye on is Washington. They can only protect one of Ilya Samsonov or Vitek Vanacek, and both of them looked really good at different parts of the season. They obviously Yzerman and McClellan or whatever his name is over there have a bit of a rapport with the Mantha deal. Maybe they can call each other up again and see if a fit can be had there.
I wonder how excited they are about the Mantha deal. Maybe not as excited as we are about how that Mantha deal shook out short term, but there's a lot of hockey to be played yet for sure. So super good points. I want to move on to the next topic here. Actually, for what it's worth, I do want to say I'm on the re-sign Bernier, draft Jesper train. So I hope I didn't just shame the family, Kevin. But I feel like a cushion with that 22nd pick where you could take a leap. But I don't, like you said, Stevie.
On that topic, I want to ask Kevin, I brought up in one of our recent articles, we talked about this, possibly trading down into the mid-teens, picking up maybe a couple extra, picks later in the draft, but moving down and getting somewhere in the mid-teens. Do you think they would go after Jesper at that point?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I think that everybody knows he's going to go somewhere in the 10 to 12 range. So I'm not a big fan of moving down when you're up in the 6 range, but I think it would make some sense for them to try to move up from 21. Is that where they're at? 21?
22.
22.
Yeah. So it would be, that would make a lot of sense. Like, watch how it develops. Some people think that Kosa is going to go 18. People have said the Oilers. I don't really see that, but because they've got some quality young goalies as well. So I think they're going to have to just watch it. I mean, we may see, and it'll make Red Wing fans, I think, the heart a little nervous, but we may see them, kind of make like a Coyotes Red Wing style deal where you move a couple of spots. Like, I could see them doing that and giving up a draft pick, but we don't see as many of the deals like that as we would in the NFL, obviously. So
who says hockey?
One other guy we didn't bring up that I think I would at least make a call on is HERZLIKINS, and I see he's 27. Like, he's still in the range where he could fit with this group, and I think we haven't seen the best of him yet. Like, I think he's a quality goaltender. He was really supreme in the international hockey, and he hasn't quite played quite as well, but he's had moments where he's looked pretty darn good.
Absolutely. Who says hockey isn't exciting in the off season? Huh? I realize they're still playing, but for our purposes, the off season. Now, I want to revisit a topic we touched on a couple of weeks ago, but things have actually changed in the coaching landscape since we last talked about it. There has still been no move to fill that assistant coach void that Dan Bilesman left behind. So I'm curious, Kevin, and I want to start with you. Any ideas? Do you think maybe Yzerman's targeting somebody specifically? We secretly hoped Igor Larionov was that guy, but I don't think that's going to pan out. Any insight on what direction the Red Wings may go to fill that void?
I really don't. I don't feel like they. I mean, it's a priority because you've got to get it filled. But I think they feel like they can take their time, and sure. I'm sure there's 5 or 6 guys that they're interested in, and I'm sure they're going to bring them in and talk to them. But I think it takes always a little time with assistants because you've got to sort of get a sense of the chemistry with the head coach. Mm-hmm. The coach has got to interview them, and I'm sure Steve Yzerman's going to be involved. So I don't see it as, I don't think there's any difficulty. I just think they're taking their time.
Sure. Makes sense. I think the move in Seattle surprised us a little bit, which may leave a few names open there. But Kyle, to you, what do you think? Any change of heart based on our last conversation with assistant coaches?
No, I think, Kevin nailed it on the head. You got to kind of wait and see, give it some time. They had that what we think might have been a power struggle between Bilesman wanting to be the head coach versus Blashill being the head coach in the locker room. So, they want to make sure this next fit is the right fit and is something that's going to move the team forward. So I'm fine with them taking their time and really doing their due diligence. And, I trust that by the time camp rolls around, they'll have someone in place.
I'm sure. Devin, you got the final word yet again. I got to switch it up. Your thoughts on the assistant coach?
Well, it's the assistant coach, right? Or it's an assistant coach spot.
Yeah.
So it's not a head coach. There's not like a real pressing need to get this figured out. They know that Blashill's going to be there. The assumption is that Huda's still going to be there. They can, like was just said, they can take their time. They can afford to do it. I'm sure that they're casting a very wide net. I would not be surprised if the eventual hire is someone that I've never heard of or maybe just never even considered.
Sure.
They talked about wanting an out of the box or kind of to bring in fresh ideas. And to me, that screams either a young coach or somebody who just doesn't have NHL experience. Mm-hmm. So I'm very curious to see what happens, but like has already been said, they can take their time. They are taking their time, and they should take their time.
I do want to throw a hypothetical out there, and I realize it's entirely imaginary, but in the spirit of Ian, our good friend Ian,
oh boy,
I know he floated the name Rick Tocchet.
Yep.
Right, and so I'd be doing him a disservice if I didn't at least ask the question. What do you think about the chances of Rick Tocchet ending up as an assistant coach? And then Kevin, based on your expertise and your experience, I'm curious what you think.
Well, a lot of head coaches, as you know, end up having to go back and be assistants and kind of restart the clock. I think it's probably too early for Tocchet to do that. I think he'd sort of wait to see if he doesn't get the Buffalo job, that he'd be next man up next fall when we play again. But boy, I would love to see that in Detroit if it were even possible, because he's a terrific coach, very underrated. And he did a great job especially defensively with the Coyotes. And I don't think he ever got enough credit with the work he did there. And, it's really a patchwork defense there.
Sure.
In the Coyotes, a bunch of guys they just kind of brought in, and he had them playing pretty darn well, I thought, and especially in harmony with the goaltending. They had Kemper was a pretty good goalie. So I think he's a very good coach. He's much better than I would have guessed based on what kind of player he was. He didn't strike me as a guy that was all very serious about it all. But boy, he sure has been.
It's interesting. It was a lot of fun being in Phoenix here. It was a lot of fun to watch them in the bubble. They generated a lot of buzz. They played pretty well, and they were exciting to watch. And unfortunately, the bottom kind of fell out. But it was fun to watch his team in the bubble last year, and it'd be interesting to see him in Detroit. So appreciate that perspective. All right. we're going to give Kevin a quick break and let Devin go first on this one, because I have got a floating idea out there that Devin called out on Twitter earlier this week. Morgan Rielly any interest in making a deal? You know, there were a lot of comments, a lot of reactions, Devin, on Twitter to that, and it seemed like the general consensus was Bertuzzi had to be included if the Red Wings were going out to get Morgan Rielly. So even if it's in our wildest dreams, if that's a possibility, Devin, I want to start with you. Is there interest in bringing Morgan Rielly to Detroit, and what would that take?
And this is something that we kind of briefly touched on last week. I know, Kyle, you brought up the idea of signing Dougie Hamilton to then flip him to Toronto for Morgan Rielly. Mm-hmm. I was on board with that idea because I like the idea of Morgan Rielly in a Red Wings uniform. I think that he could fill a big need in Detroit. If you're getting it for Tyler Bertuzzi in a draft pick, I'm going to be very hard pressed to say no to it, depending on that draft pick. I'm very hesitant to say Bertuzzi and Washington's pick. I think that's a little too much for me. I'd like to talk it down to Detroit's second round pick, which would be like pick 36 or 37. But I think it's in the ballpark. Rielly's he's not a like true number one defenseman, but I think he's a number two. So he's like he's a top line defenseman. You can pair him with Hronek and you've got a solid top pairing. It's not the best in the league, but it'll get the job done. You can pair him with Seider, and he's been around. He's been through playoff struggles with Toronto. He went through like the depths of their rebuild. So he's got that experience that he can bring to Detroit. And he's still 27. He's not like some old dude that's coming into like he's not Mark Stahl. I'm sorry, Mark. All respect to you, but we're not talking about the same player here. We're talking about a guy that could finish his career in Detroit and play 8 years.
Sure.
I love the idea, depending on the cost. I'm curious if I'm curious how much there is to that rumor and to that idea.
Makes sense. And I'm, for what it's worth, I love that you put that out there. Generated a lot of pretty sweet comments and some interesting ideas. So speaking of that, Kevin, what do you think of that whole idea of potentially dealing for Morgan Rielly?
Yeah, I mean, there's some intrigue to it. I mean, I agree with it would depend on what the return would have to be. Mm-hmm. I would be reluctant to move Bertuzzi because I think he is the Red Wings' courage. They don't have much in the way of physical players, but he plays with heart. I think everybody watches him. But, you know, I always have the feeling that people around the league, you know, he looks like a 20-goal scorer. He scored 20 goals. Everyone thinks he won't score 20, and he does. But will he always be able to do that? Because he's certainly not a natural scorer. Sure. You know, we know that. But I like him a lot. I think he's important to the team. I would be looking in a different direction to try to make that trade, but I would be intrigued by it. And I really like your assessment of him because he is not a top-notch defenseman. He's a very good defenseman. Sure. But he's not elite. You know, he's if you're bringing him in thinking, well, you know, he's going to be our new Lidstrom, you're going to be disappointed. So.
Yep. And what I like about what you said, almost gave me goosebumps, by the way, when you said that he's the Red Wings' courage. Yeah. I don't think Jamie Benn takes that shot at Dylan Larkin if Tyler Bertuzzi's on the ice, if I'm being completely honest. And I keep going back to that because I'm still so angry that there was no repercussion
as
whatsoever.
You should be.
But I think, and also he scored the overtime winner, which, hurt a little bit more there. But to that point that you made, Kevin, I don't think that happens if Tyler Bertuzzi is on the ice or even on the bench for that matter. Kyle, bring us home. Your thoughts on a Morgan Rielly deal and who would it take?
I like Morgan Rielly. I think both Devin and Kevin said the thing that we're all thinking. He is a good defenseman. We need that left-handed puck moving defenseman, which he would definitely fill that void. He's not quite the top guy that we really want, but he does have that veteran experience for a 27-year-old that could really go a long way with a Moritz Seider or pairing with a Hronek on the first line. So I do like the idea of Rielly coming over. Again, I got to go back to what we mentioned last week. I would like to see like a flip, a sign and flip for a Hamilton or Seth Jones or someone and really kind of leverage that so we could get Rielly, because I don't really want to see us lose pieces we already have. Kevin, yes, Bertuzzi is our courage. He is he's Detroit embodied right now as their wing, sure. And you need one of those guys as a wing. You can't have the Detroit Red Wings without that on the ice, that type of presence on the ice. And I think we really noticed that after he was gone for this season. And so I'll wrap it up by saying that, Devin, you make a good point. If we can get him for Bertuzzi in a second, I would say maybe Bertuzzi in the third, I would consider it. But honestly, I would like to see us get him without losing too many core pieces.
I will say we have some very passionate readers who were flabbergasted when we suggested potentially moving Bertuzzi down to the second line before the season started. So the fact that we're talking about dealing him away is not going to be received well, but that's neither here nor there. All good points. Let's pay some bills super quick. Thank you so much for watching our show. Give us a like, subscribe to the Hockey Writers channel. There's so much good stuff we have. We've got Blackhawks banter, Sabre scoop, Chicks and Sticks, and of course the OG show, the Hockey Writers Live with Mark Shig. Follow us on Twitter, sign up for our morning newsletter. Any way you want to get your hockey news, we'll deliver it to you. And also make sure that you check out Kevin on Detroit Hockey Now, on Hockey Buzz, and really just Google anything significant that's happened in the sport of hockey in the last 35 years and read what he has to say about it, because it's pretty much the gospel. So
Pat, real quick, I have to ask, before you go to bed every night, do you practice that spiel?
It's just a natural flow. It's a natural flow. What can I say? I got a gift. That's why I don't answer the questions I ask them, right?
Fair.
Let's move on to some reader comments before we have some fun near the end of the show. So not that this isn't fun, because it is, but our comment corner, again, really appreciate everybody checking out the show, commenting. We love engaging with you in that comment section. And it was busy yet again this past week. So let's start out with Rick Korth, who I actually happen to know is his birthday today. So happy birthday, Rick. Even though you're watching this,
happy birthday.
Even though you're watching this recorded, Rick, know that we're giving you a shout out. Rick indicated in the comments he thinks Yzerman may make a splash in free agencies. Let's talk about that. We asked for some hot takes in last week's column that we did that just dropped last Monday. Some takes were hotter than others, but yeah, I was accused of being lukewarm. Okay, I'm sorry. But what do you expect this offseason? Is this the year we see a splash, or are we still a ways away from that? And I'm going to kick it off by saying I think we're a ways away from that, which is why my take was lukewarm. But Kevin, you're the expert. Your thoughts on what to expect this free agency?
Well, I just did a pretty deep dive into, how much money. If you look at Cap Friendly today, you'll see that Steve has $48 million to work with, which is a fair amount of money. But obviously he only has 10 players signed, but that doesn't take into account Lucas Raymond and Sider and Joe Veleno. So you add those to the mix, and now we're up to 13, but he still has 10 players, and 9 of them are players they want to keep. The one Svechnikov, I'm sure is going to wash out, and it'll be a mercy release for him, because I really think he needs sort of a new venue to try it off.
Sure.
But when he signs all those players, it's going to cost him 17 plus million, maybe a little more, depending on if Verana wants a long-term deal. But that's still going to leave him $27 million. But he's only going to have 2 roster spots left. Unless he buys out, the 2 players, Nielsen and Panik. So, that'll give him 2 more spots. But so he can't do a lot, because Giovanni's out of option, Giovanni Smith, Chalowski, who I think fans would love to see exposed, but I don't think they will. They're a rebuilding team. Mm-hmm. As much as people love Stetcher, I think they're going to expose them. I mean, it's just a guess, but it's hard to put a 23-year-old and expose him and keep a 27-year-old who was a healthy scratch late in the season. So I know he played well in the World Championship. So I don't think he can do a lot. I think he'll poke around at the defenseman. Mike Riley's in the right age group, played really well last year. I like that. Maybe Ryan Murray, but he's been paid a lot, and I don't think he's been worth what he's paid before. So he's going to have to take a pay cut. There was a rumor today put out by NHL Network about Alec Martinez, a Michigan native. Yep. He's a little bit older, but Steve has, as long as it's a short-term deal, he might still be fine with that, because we did take the 100-year-old Mark Stahl, who played very well. For him. So
absolutely.
So I don't know if he's going to do a lot, but he'll do something.
somebody on this panel may or may not have written an article titled "Mark Stahl is not as bad as you think he is."
I mean, he played very well. And the other thing about him, and it was hard to get this information because we weren't allowed in the dressing rooms last year. But from what I understand, he was also very good in the room, and they were very pleased with how he related to the younger defense. But they really, Yzerman, if you looked at what he did, the first year he just let it go. Like, he could have added defensemen and made that team more competitive, but he didn't. He just let it go. He just wanted the natural evolution. But the second year he said, "Oh my God, I can't put those young players through that." And so he went out and got defensemen to stabilize the defense, and all of them did their job. Like, they were much more competitive. And I think he was most pleased by Stahl, who, could have been upset that he was in that position, but he wasn't. He came in, he worked hard, did what he was supposed to. So that's why there is sort of mutual interest of him coming back. But I don't think that's a slam dunk by any stretch.
Makes sense. So let's swing it over to Devin, whose heart you single-handedly broke, and you don't even realize it by talking about releasing Svech. So, Devin, what say you about free agency?
First off, if he ends up in Seattle, I'll still be happy. I'll be
there you go.
or
Vegas, or Vegas,
Vegas,
right?
or Vegas. Yes. But anyways, in terms of free agency, a lot of good names were just thrown out. I do expect Yzerman to either take on a bad contract to address the left side of the blue line, or dip into the free agency pool for it. Martinez is a very interesting name. He's won 2 cups with LA. He's from Michigan. He's a bit older, but this team doesn't have a lot of cup winners in their locker room, and that is a very valuable thing, especially for a very young team. I know, depending on the contract, I'd be interested in Alec Martinez. As for a splash, it was reported that every team has called about Dougie Hamilton, so that, of course, means that Yzerman has called about Dougie Hamilton. I don't think that that's eventually where he goes, because I think if I'm Dougie Hamilton, I'm not leaving the Carolina Hurricanes to go sign with the Detroit Red Wings unless I'm getting paid a crap ton.
$27 million.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not happening. And then there are other big names out there that could be signed, but it's like you said, Pat, it's not the right time. Give it a year or two and it'll be a different conversation. But as for right now, I think the team is a lot more interested in finding out what they have internally and then filling in the holes from that way out.
Makes sense, Devin. Makes sense. Kyle, bring us home on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see the splash happening quite this year. I think we are still a year or two out from that, enormous big free agency move that really kind of puts us over the top, whether it's, Pittsburgh going and getting Kessel or whatever it might be to really get us to that next push. So I still think we're a couple of years out. I could see a mini splash in terms of like going out and getting one of the younger players to shore up that left side D. Maybe we do go after a Jake Bean, Jake Bean, or someone, along those lines that's a little bit younger that can plugged in a little bit longer term. But in terms of like being a big splash, I don't see that happening.
Makes sense. I think all good points. I think the guessing game of what Stevie's going to do gets more and more fun as every week goes by. I love seeing the ideas floated around. So good stuff. Let's move on. Another viewer asked us about, and here we go. I'm going to give it a whirl. KIRILL-TYUTYAYEV, I think.
Rachel says no.
Yeah, Rachel is somewhere. Rachel just shuddered, and she has no idea why. But let's talk about him because there's some buzz. It seems as if he's been tabbed as kind of an underrated prospect in the Red Wings system. So let's talk about him and the impact. And Devin, I know obviously everything going on in Grand Rapids is near and dear to your heart. So I'd like to start with you.
Yeah, so like you said, he is a small forward. He is listed at 5'9", 146 pounds, which is right around my build. So that's I don't know about you, but I don't feel confident about skating in the NHL. But this season in Belarus, he had 32 points in 43 games. I took notes, folks. I'm ready today. And then the season prior in the the VHL, which is essentially the Russian AHL, he had 20 points in 27 games. So that's good production for the kid. I do think he has that kind of sleeper potential. Rachel did list him a couple episodes ago as one of those guys who really blossomed this year. And it's for good reason. The Wings signed him. It looks like he's going to head over to Grand Rapids next season. And I'm looking for him to add some weight and prove that he's not going to get tossed around.
Sure.
And also to see if that production carries over. As we talked about with Iggy, the European game is vastly different from the North American game.
Sure.
And it's going to be up to him to acclimate to his new surroundings and his new teammates, all that good stuff. And also just find his game in his new surroundings. It's not going to be the same. If he can put it all together, I like this kid's potential. I'm not saying he's going to be a top line guy, but he could be a very solid, sneaky grab coming out of the 6th or 7th round.
Well, I'm sure if he makes it to Grand Rapids there, you'll be one of the first to get to see him, and I'll be super jealous. So all good points, Devin. Kevin, over to you. I'm not going to try his last name again, but Kirill, what are your thoughts on how he's been developing?
I'm not going to try it either. We actually tried to track him down this week. And we got in contact with his ice hockey federation, and they said, we don't know all that much about him either. And they referred us to a Belarusian journalist who is going to call us. But from what I understand, and Devin said pretty much it, very slick with the puck, very undersized, hasn't had good competition yet. So it's hard to know where he's at. But he's intriguing because he's got magic. And if you got some magic, we want to see against good competition. So I think we're just going to have to wait and see. I thought I read, did he not sign with Grand Rapids, not with the Red Wings, right?
Oh, I think you're right about that. Yeah.
Yeah. But I wasn't positive of that. But anyway, so I think they've got him in, and they want to see what he's all about. And, we'll get a good indication this year in Grand Rapids.
Well, if you start talking about Red Wings players who've got magic, I think you might get the attention of a few fans out there. That's worked out pretty well in the past. Kyle, I'm sorry, I'll reverse the order for the last question when we go, but your thoughts on KIRILL, and is he flying under the radar?
Yeah, I think he is a little bit. So in his first full year in the MHL, which is their junior over there, he had 60 points in 60 games, which is really solid. And then, as Devin said, he produced well in the VHL and in Belarus last year. And on top of his 32 and 43, he also had 10 points in 13 playoff games. So he competes. I think he's there if the puck protection is there, and getting into the AHL, being on smaller ice. I think he'll really have that to work on next year. And I think, and maybe in 2-3 years, he kind of sneaks in there. And so I'm excited to see TYUTYAYEV, and I'm giving that a shot. And I think he'll kind of sneak his way as a third line player, kind of like one of those skilled third liners coming up, and then possibly sneak on the second line.
You all have my word. I will learn how to pronounce it and start our show with that next week. Devin, you got something?
I just want to take a shot at it.
Do it.
TOCCHET.
There we go. I think that's legit. I will learn it, and we will start the show off with it next week.
Love it.
Honestly, super good insight on a really good but tough question, because there's not a ton of info. Yeah. So certainly really appreciate the insight, and looking forward to seeing what he can do in Grand Rapids. Hopefully, he transitions well. So last comment from our last show. Our good friend Paradox Destroyer is back. We were worried, but they have returned, and we're so happy to see you commenting on our videos again. And Paradox Destroyer floated an interesting hypothetical out there that everybody's having fun with if they're not still in the playoffs, it seems. Jack Eichel. I don't even want to get into what it would take to get him, blah, blah, blah. What I'm more curious to know is, let's say the Wings do get him. Do we see a power struggle? Do we see too many egos in the locker room to even entertain that idea? And Kevin, you've seen a lot of that in years past, so I'm curious of your thoughts.
Yeah, like Yzerman, Fedorov. Yeah. No, Jack Eichel and Dylan Larkin are friends.
Yeah.
Very good friends. And so I would see no issues there. When one of your good friends is the captain, I think everything is all good. So I know you don't want to talk about, but it happen because they want too much, and
Right.
for a rebuilding team, it would destroy what Steve Yzerman has done. So I don't see this as any kind of fit whatsoever. But I think it would give them, Larkin goes to his natural number 2 center, and Eichel goes number 1, and they're buddies, and so it would all work fine. But would there be any wingers left? Because you'd have to trade.
So what I just heard is, you heard it here first. Jack Eichel's coming to Detroit, and he will start, and Larkin will be. No, I'm kidding. Obviously. Thanks for bringing us back to reality there, Kevin. So let's ignore reality, and Kyle, swing it to you and your thoughts on Eichel.
I don't think. Yeah, I don't think there would be a power struggle there. I think, Larkin is a true professional. He's shown when he was still an assistant a couple of years ago and hadn't gotten that C yet, that he was still ready to work and ready to be that professional. And then when he got called on to wear the C, he really hasn't shown in ego, boost or anything like it. Not in the bad sense where his ego has gone out of control or anything. So I think in that sense, Eichel being on the team would be fine. I think they'd find that workaround. It might be like a Steven Stamkos and Nikita Kucherov, where Kucherov's the better scorer, and Stamkos is still the captain and the guy they look to. You could do something along those lines. It's happened in the past. If you can have Gretzky and Messier on the same team, I think you can have Eichel and Larkin on the same team. Not saying either of those guys are Gretzky or Messier, though.
Sure. Well, I think the Yzerman-Fedorov analogy to kick the conversation off was quite telling. Devin, your thoughts on a hypothetical world where Jack Eichel comes to Detroit for almost nothing?
First of all hail
$1. Yeah. The old Chris Draper deal.
With inflation, that's a better deal than Draper.
Yeah,
that's true.
It's like $4 now. We would go on to Saber Scoop and apologize. That's what would happen first. But second, I think that what is left of the Red Wings, to what Kevin just said, I think they'd be pumped, because adding Jack Eichel makes the team better. There's no doubt about that. And I think that the players that are on the Red Wings want to start winning, and adding a guy like Jack Eichel gets them closer. Mm-hmm. And like to repeat what's kind of already been said, Larkin gets to be a second line center at that point, and I think he really maxes out what he can do at that point. And then you've got Eichel up on the top line doing what Eichel does.
Yep.
This in terms of production, he's been a top 30 player since he broke into the league, and it's rare that you can acquire those guys. So in this fun hypothetical where they're acquiring them for future considerations, that's exciting.
Where people wear shoes on their hands and hamburgers eat people. Yeah.
Yes.
So there's a consensus. It would work, but it's not going to happen. So I like it. Thanks for commenting again, Paradox. We missed you. We were worried about you missing the Mac show. So glad that you're back. All right. So let's finish our show with a little fun. We're going to call this Kevin's Corner. Kevin, like I said before, we're so honored that you would take time out to talk with us. So we've all got some questions for you that, just based on your experience and what you've lived and seen and covered over the years, we really want to pick your brain about. So I'll kick it off. And I want to talk about Steve Yzerman, because you had the opportunity to cover him, obviously, as a new player in the NHL, all the way to where he's at now as a GM. And I'm curious, how different is he now, or is he not at all? And what mannerisms do you see? How has he grown over the years?
Yeah, that's really a great question. Yeah, I was there in Port Huron on his first day. I remember that he was 153 pounds, but Jimmy Devillano tells me it was like 158. So but he was the smallest guy on the ice. And the minute he played his first scrimmage, he was incredible. And so, I remember that distinctly. And personality wise, he's very similar in terms of his approach to game. He worked so hard at being a player, and he worked so hard. And what I admired about Yzerman when he made his transition from player to general manager is he expected not to be handed anything. He didn't want to be handed anything. He wasn't, look, I'm Steve Yzerman, I'm king, so make me assistant GM. He basically apprenticed under Ken Holland. He went and learned how to scout. He went and learned about the salary cap, and he just approached it like any apprentice. He wasn't Steve Yzerman. He just was a guy trying to learn the business, and he learned so well that he was able to go to Tampa and be, quite successful. He wasn't there when they won the cup, but he was the architect, of that cup. But, he is a very private guy. He's very closed. You wouldn't want to play poker with him. He plays things close to the vest. I don't think he tells anybody anything other than Pat Verbeek. And maybe, and I am going to say maybe, I'm going to kid Chris Draper about this when I see him. I'm not sure he tells Chris everything either. I think it's just Pat Verbeek is what he shares everything with. But, he does a great job, and he's not afraid. I mean, that's what I like. That's the way he played. He played unafraid, and that's how he acts as a GM. A lot of guys are afraid what the public response was going to be. Now, he's in Detroit where everybody thinks he walks on water, so it's a little bit easier for him. But he'll go off the board. Nobody had Sider where he had him ranked. Yep. But he did it, and that's the way he's always been as a GM. So he's willing to let a guy sit for a while. Sure. He's very patient in that regard. So that's my observations about him, and all the same things that made him a great player make him a great general manager.
I love it. And really quick, and Kyle, I know you're up next. I just have to say, I just saw my brother, Nate, he guest on the show as well, sent me a screenshot a week or two ago from the Free Press back when Yzerman was drafted, and the headline that read, Red Wings settle for Yzerman. Yeah. Because obviously LaFontaine, and I just, I now knowing what we know obviously blows my mind, but back at the time, it was interesting to see how things shifted. So sorry, Kyle, I didn't mean to rain on your parade, but I had to throw that out there because that always blows my mind.
Oh, you're good. So Kevin, you covered the Dead Wing era. You covered the original grind line, the second grind line, the post Yzerman era. What has been the best era of the NHL in your opinion?
That's a great, what I liked the best was the 80s, because we had mistakes in the 80s, and mistakes lead to fun, entertaining hockey. People think, well, the players must have been more skilled. Well, no, the defenses weren't as sophisticated. I tell people this, it blows their mind. But when I started covering the league, I would estimate about 15% of the players could one-time the puck effectively when I first started. Every team had one Brad Marsh style of defenseman, kind of a human pylon that Mike Bossy could roar around and get into the clear. And now the level of sophistication of defenses is beyond, comprehension. I remember we used to run to the television and write down the great move that the guys made. Now we run to the television set and say, whose fault is it? Who made the mistake that allowed them to score the goals? Well, the reason we did that is because coaches trained us, because we'd want to talk about the great move and they'd want to talk about the breakdown, breakdown in coverage. And I think that's how the game changed. So that's why I miss the romance of the 80s, where we had a lot of mistakes, we had a lot of goals, and we had a lot of fun. Now, was that the golden era? Probably not. I would say the golden era was extended from Wayne Gretzky through Mario Lemieux. So it was probably about a 15, 18-year period where every morning you got up and you said, how many points did Mario get? How many points did Wayne get? I would say that would be the golden era.
Awesome. Love it.
So in your time covering the sport, who have been your favorite players to watch, and then who have been your favorite to interview?
I love the speed guys. I always say my all-time favorite moment, if anybody's ever been in the old Coliseum in Edmonton, you look down on the ice, and so you're kind of on top of the play. And in the 87 Stanley Cup final, Nielsen and Messier and Anderson broke down the ice, and I think Nielsen and Messier were at about Mach 3 when they hit center ice. And it was just, people talk about that Korea goal. end to end. I swear that goal that was in the Stanley Cup final was faster than that. It felt like they covered the entire ice in about 5 seconds. So that was probably one of my, favorite moments in watching that. But the players themselves that I've loved to interview and stuff. Jeremy Roenick, I ended up doing 2 books with him, but I always loved interviewing him. I say when he was 17, he acted like he was 27 or 30. He was very mature. And when he was 27, he acted like he was 17. He let his hair down a little bit and he got a little wild. So I enjoyed talking to him. Nick Lidstrom was always one of my guys. I found him to be just the politest, guy in the world, and I enjoyed talking to him. A lot of the American players I got to know very, very well. The Bill Guerins, the Mike Modanos, Tkachuk was one of my guys. I liked, talking to him as well. And Gretzky. I mean, I covered Gretzky throughout his career. He was always insightful. Like, one of my favorite moments was I went to interview him. He put on a shield for a while. And when Gretzky put on a shield in the 1980s, it was big news. I flew out to Minnesota and got him on a practice before a game against the Minnesota North Stars then. And he said, "No, I'm not going to be able to keep it, Kevin." And I said, "Well, why not?" And you expect, "Well, I lose the puck in my feet." And he goes, "I don't hear as well." And I said, "What?" Wow. He goes, "Yeah, I don't hear as well." He said, "I need to hear what's happening on the ice so I know where everybody is." And with that, he said, when that it covers it off and I don't get the same vibrations, I don't hear it. And I thought, only Gretzky.
Interesting. Yeah, for real.
Yeah, he said he didn't hear it instead of it didn't see as well. So I always like talking to him. I actually, Mario didn't talk much, but I got as many interviews as anybody with him. And I always enjoyed talking to Mario as well. So, I found most of the guys in the league were fun interviews.
Why did Gretzky have a shield? Injury or something? Or
no, he just wanted to try it. Everybody was, there are guys that had gotten some serious injuries, and he just thought, I'll give it a go and see if I play with it.
Nice. So, kind of staying in the player realm, then, some of your favorite players, maybe that you've covered that never got the chance, that never won the Stanley Cup. Does anybody stick out in your mind?
Well, again, it's Roenick. Didn't get the cup. I think it's probably cost him the Hall of Fame as well. I mean, he's right up there with his 500 goals.
Mm-hmm.
He really hasn't gotten a sniff so far. And he was quite a swashbuckling player. And now my dogs are commenting on my.
They agree. JR,
Yeah, so, I talked before about playing with courage. Roenick had a lot of courage, and I loved the jersey flapping behind him as he went up speed. And the first guy I ever fought against was Marty McSorley, because he just didn't know any better. So all those kind of things. But, he didn't win a cup. And I think I wish he would have won one, because I think people would look at his career a little bit more. I would say a guy that I didn't cover, but I wrote his book, the great Detroit Hall of Famer, Bill Gadsby, who had an incredible career, was Gordie Howe's best friend, but just couldn't win the cup. Had a chance to. He says that Henri Richard stole one from him. He gloved the puck into the net in that famous Stanley Cup final. So, and I think it bugged him all the way. He's passed away now, but the fact he didn't win a cup, even though he was a Hall of Famer, like he wished he would have had one. So, and then another guy is Marcel Dion, who was an incredible player, obviously. But I think, people, even though he had, 700 plus goals, I think people look at his career as, incomplete. And I think it's wrong, but I think people do look at that. And so I wish he would have gotten one as well.
With the recent NFL news about Carl Nassib's announcement, do you feel like the NHL is in a place where they will see an active player come out? And how do you anticipate the NHL would react to that?
Well, it's interesting. I would have said 20 years ago that they would have reacted badly.
Mm-hmm.
But, things have changed. And one of the reasons is, Brian Burke, who is, you would not foresee him leading the charge. for gay rights, and he has, been outspoken. And of course, we've gone through now the NHL embracing the idea that hockey is for all. And because of that, I think it's changed attitudes. And I think the European players have really helped change the attitudes. Swedish players and Finnish players in particular are really, we're different players. They're different style human beings, and it's much more accepted over there. So I think the European influence has helped as well. So yeah, I think they would. And clearly there's always been rumors that there were players, and
Sure.
But it isn't like in hockey, like players used to be afraid to be religious.
Yeah.
Because it was such a it's not like baseball or football where people are openly religious. Hockey, they don't talk about it, because it's looked down upon. So,
Sure.
So I would have thought 2 years ago that it wouldn't have been, we would have had issues with it. Now, I don't think so. I think people would be very accepting.
And to add to that, it's interesting you brought up Brian Burke. I just finished reading his book not too long ago, and he does a great job being an advocate for hockey being for everyone. So
yeah, for sure.
So as much as things change, it also seems like things stay the same. Officiating in the NHL has been called into question, it seems, now more than ever. In your opinion, does the NHL need to look at officiating and maybe change the way they do things?
Well, that's an interesting question. I used to have this article that, and it was a quote about the state of officiating. And it really just kind of brings home all the issues we have with it today. And so I kept that around. And the reason I kept it is because it was from 1937. And the point I use is that, for as long as I can remember in covering the league, and, nothing has changed. Everything has changed, but nothing has changed. Every year we complain about officiating.
Yeah.
And I say what I remember Brian Lewis, who was a supervisor of officials, in a story that I did, said to me, Kevin, if we could find better officials, don't you think we'd hire them? And the answer is yes, they would. It's a very difficult game to officiate. I'll start there. Almost impossible, to be honest with you. Players are skating 23 miles an hour. Pucks are being shot at 100 miles an hour now. They're wearing suits of armor. They're human missiles, and it's a very dangerous game. When players come together, it's a car crash now. It's very, very difficult. Every time we change a rule, there's a butterfly effect. It affects some other aspect of the game that we weren't counting on. And they've tried everything. We basically officiate by memos. We've had all these rules in place, but we send out memos every year that, we want you to clamp down on this. We want you to do that. Officials will do it when you send them a memo. When you send them a memo, they'll do it. So I've always said, well, someone tell me what it is we can do to make it better, because I'm pretty sure the league would do it if they could. There doesn't seem to be an answer. Saying all that, this season, it's been real bad. and because of that, I'm now open, even though I've said, give me an idea of how to make it better. And, I'll personally go to New York and talk to Bettman about it. But I think it's probably time to, I like the way you phrase that about, to do something different. And maybe it is time to do that. Maybe it is time to just, stop thinking about the way we've always done it and look at it completely different. Like, okay, what can we do to make officiating better? Is it just one referee? Do we need just to, use instant replay in almost everything? What is it? I think you need a bunch of learned guys to get in a room and say, look, everything's on the table, and let's take a look and see, whether we can come up with something better, because it does seem like this in particular playoffs, it's been worse than usual, and it's usually pretty bad.
Remember that time we thought video review would fix everything, and then Brett Hull scored?
Yeah, so, and people in Buffalo still haven't gotten over it.
Yeah, and I don't blame them. To be honest, I probably wouldn't be over it either. We'll talk to Saber Scoop about that actually.
Yes.
All right, we've had you on the hot seat enough, Kevin. I got one more question for you, and then we'll let you go. Should they, being the Red Wings, retire Sergei Fedorov's number?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Will they?
Well, I think eventually. Probably not in Jimmy Devellano's lifetime.
Okay.
That would be, I think he feels that the Fedorov wronged him, and I think he feels he insulted the Ilitch family. I'm sure if I asked Sergei that today, if he did that, he didn't intend to do that.
Sure.
But I wish that they could just all get over their feelings about him and put him in, because he was a tremendous Red Wing and a tremendous player, a very, very, very bright man. I remember interviewing him when the Berlin wall came down, and I remember his quote was, this is a great day because we can write our politics on the wall. And just the phrasing of that just kind of speaks to, how deep, he kind of really was. By the way, Konstantinov thought it was a very bad day. He said, because the mafia was going to run Russia after that. He's actually right in his prediction. So,
wow, that's
interesting.
Cannot thank you enough for coming on our show and giving us that type of insight. We don't have a lot of that, so certainly really appreciate it. Thank you to the viewers again for watching us, for joining us. Give us a like, subscribe, comment, share. We'd love for you to tweet. However you want to reach us, we're here, and we'll make sure we engage. So until next time, again, thank you so much, Kevin.
Yes.
Devin and Kyle, we'll see you soon, and everybody have a great day.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yep. See you later, guys.